Greetings, people. It's Mr. Pull the Trigger yet again on another episode of the Enlightenment series. I'm so excited again today because I came across an article from the First Lady of the Kenyan Republic, the First Lady of the Kenyan government. She made an address that at this point, we now need to intervene and we now need to start regulating churches. We now need to start regulating these shrines. Church of God, people, some of you are taking this Enlightenment series for granted, but believe you me, the heads of states are watching what we are doing here. The heads of state are listening to these exposés that we are doing here. And it's only a matter of time until we get all the responsible governments stand up to this tyranny of these charlatans, of these false prophecies, of these false prophets. It's only a matter of time. Believe you me, at that end of the tunnel, there's light. And we are going there. We are going to remain consistent. And we are going to remain devoted to this call. To make sure that the governments chip in. To make sure that the government play their role in protecting the citizens. In protecting its own citizens. Because what has been done by these charlatans, what has been done by these false prophets, let no lie be told, is so bad. And you know this from experience. I'm not just bubbling here. I'm not just ranting here. Most of you are victims of these charlatans. Most of you are victims of these false prophets. Most of you have been robbed by these false prophets. Most of you lost your assets. You lost your money. You lost your investments because of the deceptions of these prophets. So for how long are we going to entertain them? And for how long are the responsible authorities, the governing authorities, going to remain silent to a pertinent issue of this nature? And the appeal that I'm making to all the African governments, the appeal that I'm making to the head of states, of governments, and responsible ministers, parliamentaries, is to start now searching and looking into churches, is to start now regulating these churches. There's absolutely no reason why churches should not be regulated. They've been allowed to operate without any sort of monitoring or censorship because it was believed that religion is a matter of uplifting the spirits of the citizens, of the nation, of the people. Religion and Christianity and these church structures were put in place so that, these structures, these churches can kind of, realign the moral fiber of the society, can kind of reposition and put to order the moral fiber and protect the nation on a global scale, on a national level. But they're actually doing the opposite. These churches are doing the opposite. They've contributed to almost the biggest moral decay in our nations. They've contributed to the most, economic disruptions in a nation. They've been doing all these illegal activities under the guise of this church structure because there's no one who's looking, who's digging deeper to understand how these churches operate. But these churches, they've been the biggest syndicates, be it in the movement of currency outside of the country, be it in the movement and transporting of natural resources outside of the country, be it in the business of laundering money and embezzling funds out of the country. Because these institutions are not regulated, they are not monitored, and they have become an opportunity, a window of opportunity for other, illegal entities, business people in countries, and other politicians to use these structures, since all their activities are tax deductible. They don't even pay no single tax to the taxman. They don't. So all that they make in the form of offerings, tithes, donations, it's 100% profit. 100% profit, because these are business institutions. A country on an economic perspective has a way that it sustains itself. And this all comes from the forces of supply and forces of demand and the circulation of money in an economy. And each and every economy can only take a certain quantum of giving. Like, remember, for an economy to be functional, there must be a balance in your exports and your imports. There must be a balance in your supply and your demand. The moment you start having high demand for certain things and the supply is limited, you end up having things like shortages, scarcity, and as a negative result, it will lead to inflation. And in each and every scenario, when we have the exportation of goods higher than the importation of goods, we end up having a deficit on our trade accounts as a nation. So in the case of churches, people have given so much, they've taken so much money into these church institutions. They've just been giving, receiving nothing. And this kind of compromises, the stability of an economy as a whole, because this money that they get, they're not investing it in the countries in which they are operating in. This money that they get in the form of tithes, seeds, donations, and some of the money that they are getting from other business entities to take it out of the country is not declared anywhere. That's why you end up seeing them investing and moving all this money, most of it in cash. Why do you think they have private jets? Why do you think they do have private jets? These private jets are being used to transport diamonds, gold, to transport hard cash to countries, because these private jets, they barely use the normal route whereby they are inspected, they are being checked and verified if they are carrying, legal substances. No, they have their own, private port of entries where they are not being searched, where there's no any, protocol that is being observed to see if their movement is legal or illegal. That's why they acquire private jets, so that they can, elicit these illegal transactions and these illegal activities under the radar. So all this contributes to economic imbalances. How? How does it do that? Imagine if there is 100 million that is taken out of the country, and this is money that is in the form of foreign currency, mostly US dollars. It's taken out of the country. It's not accounted for. This is money that has been taken out of the cycle, out of the entire economic cycle, and it's going to create a deficit, which is going to create pressure on the national banks. And when the national banks suffer this amount of pressure, which has been caused by money that has been taken out of the system in ways which are not accounted for. Because when the national banks of each and every country print this money, they print money that is enough to sustain the economy as a whole. But when we have a situation whereby the money is being moved out of this country through channels that do not bring that money back into the system, the nation will start having serious problems. They'll start going now to borrow to cover for that deficit, because there's just money that is just gone out of the system and it was not accounted for. So what does this lead to? It leads to the economy having a lot of credit, which most of the African countries are not even able to pay that credit. And when African countries are not able to pay that credit that they've accumulated or acquired, it puts pressure on them, and they will start trying to increase taxes to the taxpayers. They will start trying to increase prices. The cost of production for everything will also now start increasing. And when the cost of production starts increasing, this will now put a shortage, or it will also put an increase in the prices of everything in the country. And the country as a nation now, the living standards of people will start deteriorating, because there are certain, factors of the economy that have been disrupted by these illegal transactions, which are being conducted by your prophets, by your pastors. These ones with big mega churches. They are doing all these things. That's why we are calling now for the governments to chip in, not only to save the economies, but to chip in to save the citizens as well. Because our biggest victims here, our most vulnerable victims, are the citizens, the gullible believers. And I don't want to put and impound more pressure on the believers for their ignorance, because they've also gone through this process of indoctrination shame. They've gone through the most. So it's not easy for you to recondition their mindsets or to change what they've come to believe as true. That's why you see them remaining defensive. That's why you see them not being able to leave these shrines, because they've become part of this whole system and they have believed it to be true. And they remain hopeful that things in their lives are going to change, and those things are never going to change. That's why we're calling for the governments to come in. They need to come in and put an end. They need to come in and start auditing these churches. They need to come in and start taxing these churches, because these churches are not bringing any economic transformation or development. They are just receiving, and they're not producing any value to the economy. They're not doing anything of significance that can change the landscape of the African society. They're not doing anything. If it was possible, the government should come up with some sort of standards and principles upon which a church can be registered. It must no longer be registered as a non-governmental organization, because these shrines are making more money than even most of the businesses that we have, and they're not giving back that money to support the economies. If it was possible, if these churches could just be closed down and we remain with these mainline churches. They are also diabolic, most of them. Your Roman Catholics are cults. Your Anglicans, they are cults. Your Baptists, they are all operating on occultic, establishments and kind of practices. But if the government comes in and, like what Rwanda did, and close all these shrines that are being administered by, less qualified people. Yeah, they are less qualified and God did not choose them. Don't even tell me that God chooses the unqualified. They are less qualified and God did not even choose them. This is my cry to the government to come in and banish them and close them. This entire year of 2022, they just have to demolish all these structures, because they are not bringing any value to the economy. They are not at all. They are destroying the lives of people. They are destroying the spiritual, lives of believers. They are. So I want to thank the government of Kenya for what they did, for calling to this call of action, for now starting to move and making moves to protect its citizens. So people, I'll check you again on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I want to hear what you think, so that we can keep moving this enlightenment series forward. It's Mr. Pull the Trigger. I'm out.